In 1909, Martha Rendell committed a series of crimes so heinous they'd be suitable for a movie or television show. She was tried, convicted, and hanged for these offences. Thomas Nichols Morris and his wife Sarah had 9 children in what she described as an unhappy and quarrelsome marriage, with Thomas having kept a mistress, Martha Rendell. Looking for a fresh start, Morris and Sarah moved with their 8 children, one had previously died, from Adelaide to Perth, but little did they know this was the beginning of the end. Rendell followed her lover out west. After a nasty fight, Morris kicked Sarah out of the home, leaving her 5 youngest children, Olive, Annie, Arthur, George, and William, with Morris. Rendell moved into the house and posed as his wife. The children were told to call her mother, under the threat of beatings. Once there, the terror began. Rendell brutally abused Morris's children, once beating Annie so savagely that she could not walk. And then Morris's children began dying. The first was 9-year-old Annie Mae Morris on 28th of July 1907. A local doctor, Dr. Cuthbert, issued a certificate stating the cause of death was diphtheria. At the time, there was a diphtheria outbreak in Perth and hospitals were full. Diphtheria is a bacterial disease that causes convulsions, vomiting, and diarrhea and is often fatal. One of Queen Victoria's daughters, Princess Alice, had died of it in 1878, as had one of Alice's young daughters, Marie. Then, Olive Lillian Morris, just 5 years old, died on the 6th of October 1907. A year and a day after Olive died, 14-year-old Arthur Joseph Morris died on the 7th of October 1908. You'd think by now alarm bells would be ringing, but they did not. In April 1909, Rendell began targeting a second son, 14-year-old George. Rendell coated his tonsils with the substance, frightening George, who ran away to his mother's place some streets away. Morris reported George missing to police. Neighbours also expressed concern to police as 3 of George's siblings had recently died in suspicious circumstances. Detective Inspector Mann took over inquiries and found George at his mother's home. George claimed to have run away because his stepmother had killed his siblings and was trying to poison him as well. Thomas Morris and Martha Rendell were arrested. Rendell had purchased large quantities of hydrochloric acid during the period of the children's illnesses. It was found that Rendell was swabbing the children's throats with the acid. The inquiry was hampered by the time that had elapsed since the deaths, and because doctors could not say what effect swabbing with acid would have. Detectives obtained permission to exhume the bodies, and this was done on the 3rd of July 1909. Autopsies showed that a poison had been administered, and this had caused inflammation and hemorrhage of the bowel. There was no scientific evidence as to the effect of swabbing with hydrochloric acid, and police prevailed upon the Department of Health to experiment on rabbits and guinea pigs. This proved that such swabbing with acid would bring about the effects seen by the autopsies. During the inquiry, a neighbour gave evidence that, through a window, she had seen Rendell swabbing Arthur Morris's throat and had heard his agonising screams and cries for help. Another neighbour claimed he often peeked in the windows to see Rendell standing in front of a screaming victim, rocking back and forth as if in ecstasy. Some witnesses claimed that they witnessed her masturbating. Although Thomas Morris was also charged with the murders, he was acquitted, as it was believed he had not been aware of the crimes until after the children's deaths. Rendell was found guilty of the crime by the all-male jury, despite the lack of a motive. Rendell was hanged in Fremantle Prison at 8 a.m. on the 6th of October 1909. At no stage did she show any remorse for her despicable crimes. Olive, Annie, and Arthur are buried in unmarked graves in the paupers section of Karrakatta Cemetery and Crematorium in Perth. Thomas Morris died in 1935 and his wife Sarah in 1949. George went on to serve in World War I with the 6th Australian Infantry Battalion. He returned to Australia in 1918 and settled in Victoria, where he married Ruby Hardage in 1922. George outlived his remaining siblings, dying in Victoria on the 7th of December 1984.